Hello folks, today we're going to do a little video about rehabbing the front steering components on a 2007 Dodge Ram 3500 heavy duty. As you can see, I've got the front tires off already, and more importantly, I believe in safety. We're not using cement blocks. We're not using logs. We're using God's honest jack stands made for this purpose and a heavy duty jack. Almost every component you see under here we will be replacing in this video. And we will be doing it the safe and correct way. After removing the tire, the next thing you have to do is remove the calipers. To do that, you remove this bolt here and this bolt right here. Now, after you've taken off, it's a real good idea to hang it out of your way. Don't let it hang by those hoses, unless of course you plan on replacing those too. Next, you're going to want to remove the cotter pin from the axle nut, and then remove the axle nut. Okay, once you have the caliper off, you can remove the axle bolt or axle nut. I'm using an 1" and 11/16 socket. It fits on the metric nut. Next step is taking the rotor off. Sometimes they can become rust welded onto the unit bearing, and you have to pound on it to get it off. It's best to hit on the face, here, or here. If you have to hit on the back, use a piece of wood to shield the disc. Once you get the rotor off, you have to get the 4 unit bearing bolts off. Those are 18mm. When it comes time to take the unit bearing off, they can really be rust welded in. Use a socket extension on the existing nut. Have a helper turn the wheel. Use the hydraulic pressure to push it out. Don't beat yourself to death. Another part of the project is removing the tie rod ends. The short one on this side, long one on the other side. That's done by taking out this nut here, and then using a ball joint fork, or commonly known, some people call it a pickle fork, to remove the joint, like so. This tool can also be used and comes in handy for taking the drive shaft out of the housing. Sneak it in behind there and just pry. And out it comes. We will be replacing this universal joint here also today. Removal of the steering knuckle to replace the upper and lower ball joints is done by removing this nut here and this nut here. sadly, the upper I have to use hand power for. Once you get the upper nut off, this bracket holds the ABS wire, which goes onto your unit bearing. Make sure you replace this when you put it all back together. To remove the steering knuckle, use your pickle fork again. Tap it in. And tap here. And tap here. And watch your toes. Because they usually don't give you any warning before they come down. Like that. Next, we're going to start to remove the lower ball joint. You notice it has a snap ring, and it's a good idea to take and just tap that snap ring to break the rust loose, just so you get some movement. Then take your snap ring pliers and take your snap ring out. The upper ball joint does not have a snap ring. There's a rubber boot on the lower ball joint that you have to remove before you can put the ball joint press on. Ball joint press is basically an oversixed, underprivileged C-clamp with a hole in the bottom and a series of collars that will help you press the ball joint out. This one, the bottom one, goes up. Sometimes I need more than 850 foot-pounds of torque, and you got to use manual labor again. Like I said, the upper ball joint gets pressed out up. This is what your ball joint press should look like. You can utilize the bottom hole to remove that ball joint. Once you got the ball joints out, it's a good idea to take a wire brush and clean the mounting surfaces. You don't want any debris or anything else sitting in there when you're trying to get that ball joint seated down all the way in its spot. This one has some extra stuff I got to get out of there with a screwdriver. But make sure those mounting surfaces are good and clean, or you'll have a problem later on. Now the new ball joints come with Zerk fitting places. Place to put a Zerk fitting. The factory ones are permanent, no lubrication needed, which is why they fail. You should always try and make sure this port faces the rear of the vehicle to make it easier to grease later on. Now, installation of the lower ball joint is just opposite of removal. I like to put the bottom one in first so I can utilize the top hole for the press. Now I need to mention that you don't need to go out and buy a ball joint press kit. This ball joint press kit I got from O'Reilly Auto Parts, and you put a small deposit down on the tool and they give you a 48-hour rental. Basically for no cost, because they refund your deposit when you bring it back. Best program I've heard of yet. This front end retro also includes new stabilizer bars from Top Gun Customs. Stabilizer bars, upper and lower, come out with 4 bolts, one there, one right there, and the other one's behind here we already taken out. What you gotta have for safety on this one is have your axle supported, also have the frame supported. You want to have this in a 0 tension or neutral tension position, or you're going to get hurt. Okay, now we're going to show removal and replacement of the lower control arm. We've already done the upper control arm, and you notice we have the axle suspended on jack stands and the truck on jack stands to relieve any pressure on that control arm. Now first, what you want to notice is the position of your score mark on your eccentric washer. This is going to get you preliminary alignment so you can get it to the alignment shop. And that's why we also take the stress off that bar, because if you don't, you're going to shear that bolt off. You got the front end apart, you got the axle shaft out. Now would be a good time to replace this U-joint. It is also a permanent U-joint, which means it has no way to lubricate it. It has little clips that you have to remove. The reason I say this is a good time to change your U-joints is because you already have the ball joint removal tool, which can double as a U-joint removal tool. Please don't pound on your yokes to try and get your U-joints out. O'Reilly also has a U-joint removal tool that looks surprisingly similar to this, that keeps you from damaging your yokes. Right tool, right job. When you're replacing tie rods, and tie rod ends, and drag links, measure between the outside of each tie rod and get that measurement so you can get the new ones in there in approximately the same space.